Blessing was just a poor girl with no parents, no helper, and no future. She was passed from house to house like a used broom. She was only 15 when her uncle dropped her off at the front gate of Madame Grace's house. He didn't even knock. He just looked at her and said, "Behave yourself. She doesn't like noise. If you disgrace me, don't come back to my house." Then he turned around and walked away without waiting to see if she'd be accepted. Blessing stood there, barefoot, holding a small black nylon bag. Inside it, one wrapper, a Bible with torn pages, and a bar of soap already broken in two. That was all she had to her name. The house looked like something from a magazine big gate, flowers trimmed like wedding cake, and a veranda that stretched wide like a church altar. She didn't know if she was allowed to walk in. She was about to turn back when the front door creaked open. An old woman stepped out slowly. Her skin was light, like someone who used to be beautiful but was now tired of being seen. She held a cup in one hand and a stick in the other. "You're the girl?" the woman asked. Blessing nodded. "What's your name?" "Blessing, ma." "Come inside." That was all. No welcome, no smile. Just a short sentence that opened the door to a whole new life. But not a new life of joy. Not yet. She wasn't coming in as a daughter. Not even as a proper worker. Just a girl with no voice, no name, no power. Blessing started work the very next day. Nobody showed her what to do. She just woke up early, found a broom, and started sweeping. By 6 a.m., she had cleaned the compound. By 7 a.m., the kitchen was washed. By 8 a.m., she had already boiled water, even though nobody told her how Madame Grace took her tea. That first morning, she brought the tea without milk, not knowing. Madame Grace didn't complain. She just sipped and nodded once. From that day, they found a rhythm. Blessing never spoke unless she was asked. She ate last, sometimes nothing at all. She slept near the kitchen door on a folded mat with one wrapper used to cover herself at night, clean tables in the morning, and dry her face when no one was looking. There were photos all over the house. Large frames of smiling children graduations, birthdays, but no voices, no footsteps, no calls. They were Madame Grace's children, and they were far away. "She's too proud," some neighbors whispered. "That's why they don't come." But one evening, as Blessing mopped the hallway, she heard the old woman sigh from the living room chair. She didn't look up, but the voice was heavy. "They all forgot me. They called me a witch," Madame Grace said softly. Blessing stood still for a moment. Then she continued mopping. Later that night, when the house was quiet, she came back to the sitting room with warm water in a bowl. She knelt down and began to rub Madame Grace's feet gently. She didn't say anything, but her hand spoke. That was the first night Madame Grace looked at her and said, "Thank you, Blessing." She had finally called her by name. Time moved slowly in the mansion, like dust falling through sunlight. Madame Grace stopped going outside. Then she stopped walking to the dining table. Then her laughter disappeared completely. Her legs grew weak. Her appetite faded. But one thing never changed. Blessing was always there. She began sleeping on the floor beside Madame Grace's bed. She set alarms to wake every 2 hours. She cooked soft porridge. She fed her with a spoon, cleaned her when she soiled herself, and rubbed her legs with shea butter. Not one child called. Not one visitor came. One night, as the moonlight slipped through the curtain, Madame Grace reached for Blessing's hand. "Blessing," she whispered, barely audible. "Yes, ma." "Please promise me you won't leave this house when I'm gone." Blessing blinked. "I don't know, ma." The old woman looked into her eyes. Promise me that you'll stay. No matter who comes, no matter what they say, don't leave this house. Blessing's heart beat fast. She didn't understand, but she nodded. I promise. She didn't know she had just agreed to something that would shake everything. 3 days later, the old woman took her last breath while Blessing was still holding her hand. 2 days later, three cars pulled into the compound SUVs with tinted glass, drivers with clean shoes. Madam Grace's children had returned, dressed in black lace and gold jewelry. Their perfume filled the house. So did their voices. They didn't look around. They didn't ask who had buried their mother's fingernails, who had held her while she coughed blood, who prayed over her as her body failed. They only looked at the house. She's dead. Yes. Where's the lawyer? Who's holding the documents? One of the sons saw Blessing standing quietly by the stairs. Is this the maid? Another said, let her pack and go. We'll repaint and sell. Blessing stepped back. Her chest was tight. Her hands were shaking, but she hid them under her wrapper. She wanted to speak, but who would listen? Then the gate knocked. A man in a black suit entered. He carried a brown file. His voice was calm. I'm from Madam Grace's lawyer. She left instructions. Everyone must be present. The room fell quiet. And for the first time, Blessing was told to sit down with the family. The lawyer sat down and opened the file slowly. The children rolled their eyes. She left something, one daughter scoffed. We didn't know she was planning drama. But then he began to read. To my beloved children, I leave my love and my prayers. They nodded, expected. Then he continued. To Blessing. The room went silent. The girl who sat beside me in my final days, who fed me when I couldn't feed myself, who prayed for me when even my children forgot the sound of my voice. I leave this house. Every room, every spoon, every plant in the garden. The words hit the floor like thunder. One of the sons stood up. No way, that's not possible. But the lawyer laid down the proof, the signed documents. The room had gone quiet after the lawyer finished reading, but he wasn't done. There's one more thing, he said, pulling out a flash drive. He plugged it into the television. The screen lit up. Madam Grace appeared sitting in her usual chair, with a wrapper tied loosely over her chest and a Bible resting on her lap. Her voice was soft but clear. If you're watching this, I'm already gone. But I want my children to know the truth. Your father took you away when you were young. He told you I wanted to kill him. He said I was wicked, that I poisoned his food. But what he didn't tell you was that he had another woman. Even while I was still breastfeeding your baby brother, I kept quiet for years. I didn't fight for you because I didn't want to drag you into our war. But after he died, I hoped you'd come back one day and ask me yourself. But you never did. I forgave him long ago, and I forgave you too. You were only children. But the girl who stayed with me in my last days, she did what none of you did. She listened. She stayed. She wiped my tears. At that moment, the youngest son sat down slowly. The daughter covered her mouth, her eyes wide. The oldest son stood stiff, blinking fast. Don't fight this, Madam Grace said gently. The house is not just a building. It's my peace, and I'm giving it to the only person who gave it back to me. Then the video ended. Silence returned. But this time, it was a different silence. Not the kind that ignores, but the kind that remembers. It was almost a year after the burial. The compound no longer smelled like Dettol and grief. New life had quietly moved in. Blessing had not changed much. She still woke up early, still swept the steps, still rubbed shea butter on her feet. Only now, she sat in Madam Grace's favorite chair every evening, reading the same Bible they used to share. She hadn't repainted the house. She hadn't changed the curtains. She kept everything the way it was. The only new thing she added was silence, the soft, healing kind. Then one Tuesday afternoon, just before the rain, she heard a knock at the gate. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door and froze. It was the youngest son, Daniel. He looked different, slimmer, paler. His eyes were sunken, and he was holding something in his hand, a small flower, a single white hibiscus. I didn't come to fight, he said. His voice was low, hoarse, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Blessing stepped aside. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, and he walked in slowly. His eyes moved around the sitting room, pausing on the family portrait. He didn't sit. I watched the video again, he said after a long silence. 3 times, alone, in a hotel room. He swallowed hard. She never told us any of it. She just stayed quiet. Let us believe the worst. Blessing's fingers were still. She sat with her hands folded in her lap. My father lied to us, took us to Canada and said she was evil. He said she poisoned his soup. I was only 10. He turned to her, eyes glossy. I didn't know she cried every birthday. I didn't know she forgave us. He walked to the chair where Madame Grace used to sit. He didn't sit. He knelt beside it. I know this house is yours, he said. I don't want anything. I just want to sit here for a while, just to say sorry to her and maybe to you too. Blessing stood up slowly. She walked to the kitchen, came back with a cup of tea. She placed it on the stool beside the chair, just the way Madame Grace used to like it. Then she whispered, "You can sit." He did. And for the first time since the will was read, a child returned home. Not as an owner, not as a fighter, but as a son who had finally learned the truth. Later, the daughter returns too, but she doesn't come in. She stands quietly at the gate, holding the iron bars with trembling hands. She watches the house for a long time, then wipes her eyes and leaves. Maybe she'll come back one day. Maybe not. Blessing, now the quiet owner of the mansion, opens the gates to 2 orphan girls from her village, just like she once was. She lets them sleep in warm beds, feeds them well, and teaches them that kindness is never wasted. The house that once echoed with silence now holds laughter, healing, and second chances. Because Madame Grace may have died with sorrow in her heart, but Blessing made sure she was remembered with love.